influence of the canal, even in prospect, upon business is extensively felt and acknowledged. When the canal shall have gone into actual operation, its effect will give increased value to and call into use the immense water power yet unoccupied in the vicinity, thus adding to our population by giving profitable occupation to thousands, extending and invigorating trade, and securing to the agriculturalist a ready market and a good price for all the surplus products of his land. Massachusetts Spy, July 26, 1828. The city of Worcester began as a small town at the headwaters of the Blackstone River. For an extensive period after its formation, Worcester was simply a subsistence farming village, not having much more than an agricultural-based economy. Farmers would produce enough goods to survive and sell any surplus they had at the market. By 1790, Worcester had just over 2,000 residents. With Worcester's small population and the surrounding towns being similar in size, farmers had to bring their goods all the way to Boston or Providence. The transportation of excess crops to a port city was very expensive, with a cost per ton of $25 for every 100 miles traveled. In addition to the expense, the trip from Worcester to Providence took upwards of a week. With this long trip, crops would become more susceptible to spoiling before even arriving at the market. As papers from the time noted, it cost less to transport goods from England to Boston than it did from Boston to Worcester. The length and cost of these trips made it difficult for the average Worcester citizen to make a continuous profit. However, there was more than just farmland in Worcester. Early signs of industry were already starting to emerge. By the mid-1700s, the village of Worcester could boast several water-powered mills. They were small operations consisting of saw, bark, and woolen mills, as well as several blacksmith shops. Early as 1789, a cotton manufactory could be found on a tributary to the Blackstone River, Mill Brook. Complete with a carding machine, spinning jenny, and 2 looms, it was a sign of what was to come. Revolutionary Isaiah Thomas came to Worcester in 1775 to print his newspaper, the Massachusetts Spy, for the Revolutionary movement. After having trouble securing enough paper to print as much as he pleased, Thomas established his own paper mill in 1796, just 1 year after Slater's Mill opened in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Thomas's mill brought a hint of what Worcester could achieve if Worcester's industrialists, like the farmers, were given access to a faster and cheaper method of transportation. The idea of a Providence to Worcester Canal was first proposed in 1796. Providence native and entrepreneur John Brown wanted a connection to Worcester and the so-called heart of the Commonwealth. He felt that a canal would open up industry in the valley, allow further import and export of goods, as well as allow for new markets that were not before possible due to cost. However, Boston did not want the canal made, as it would divert trade away to Providence. With this in mind, the Massachusetts General Court ruled against the building of the canal, and Brown never got to see his plan come to fruition. Yet the idea of the canal was still an intriguing one. Years down the road, in 1822, Levi Lincoln and other prominent leaders in the area would meet in order to discuss the idea of a canal once again. Surveys were conducted in order to show the potential increase of imports as well as exports of towns in the area, with many towns projecting a large increase in business. The effort to revive the canal project proved successful, and in 1823, the Blackstone Canal Company was formed. The Blackstone Canal was surveyed to traverse the steep, hilly area of Worcester, all the way to the port city of Providence. The canal was designed to follow the natural landscape of the Blackstone River, utilizing channels that would pass in and out of the waterway. The canal was to be 32 feet wide, tapering down to 18 feet at the base, with a depth of 3.5 feet. From Worcester to Providence, there was a total elevation drop of over 450 feet along the 45-mile path. A descent this drastic required the use of locks. Locks are portions along the canal that raise and lower boats during the voyage. These locks were built with stone and designed with outlets to allow the controlled flow of water either in or out whenever needed.
And during the winter months, that was a time here when they're building the Blackstone Canal. They actually would build the locks, some of the culverts, anything requiring cut stone. And this is a perfect example. They used the materials right from the hillside. If you notice, right here are the cuts. During the winter months, that was the time we would cut stone, keep my skilled stonemasons employed, and when spring came, we put this all together.
48 locks sat along the length of the canal in total, each measuring 82 feet long and 10 feet wide, to accommodate for even the largest of the projected canal boats. Construction of the canal was slow to start. Sections of the canal were awarded to individual contractors, some of which would abandon their section with frustration growing over the project. In 1826, Chief Engineer Benjamin Wright finally arrived after the completion of the Erie Canal to get the Blackstone Canal back on track. He brought with him some respected contractors from his past work. It was one of these men, Tobias Boland, that led the Worcester end of the project. Boland knew that unskilled workers would be a problem with building a canal to this extent. And being an Irishman himself, he brought 20 skilled Irish workers to help dig the canal at the Worcester end. These Irish workers would not be such a small group for long, as eventually 500 skilled Irish workers would arrive to help with the job. The locals did not like these Irish workers, and many had contracts stating that they would not be allowed to live in the city limits during the extent of their work. Thus, the Irish workers were forced to form a shantytown. This was located near modern-day Lower Shrewsbury Street and the surrounding area. A citizen of Worcester described the shantytown by saying, "More miserable hovels I never saw. The sides of the house had sods upon them, yet it is said that they are better off here than in Ireland, because here they can get food." As the canal neared completion, the enthusiasm grew. Farmers planted additional acres of crops in anticipation of the opening. On October 7th, 1828, the packet boat Lady Carrington arrived in Worcester by way of Providence, indicating the day had finally come. Her arrival was announced by the firing of cannon and the ringing of bells, in a town longing to see what prosperity the canal would bring. The first canal boats containing freight started their voyages soon after, and by 1829, there were around 75 boats arriving in Worcester per month. In the following years, Worcester continuously brought in an excess of goods, amounting to 4,000 tons, while also managing to export over 800 of the same. In total, the county exported 25,000 tons of goods during its first year of operation alone. While farmers and merchants needed to pay tolls to pass through the locks, the canal still saved them upwards of $3 per ton, a considerable amount for the time period. To move the boats along the canal, beasts of burden, typically being horses, would be tethered to the boats in pairs. The horses would pull the canal boats from towpaths, which were located directly next to the canal. It was necessary for a boy to watch or ride the horses in order to guide them properly down the paths. The use of water in the towing process greatly reduced the fatigue, as well as lowering the power needed to tow any crops or goods. Due largely to the completion of the Blackstone Canal, Worcester's industry flourished. Many wanted a piece of the profitability brought by the canal, and in 1830, Worcester's population had jumped to over 4,000, a 62% increase over the previous 2 decades. Despite the increase in population as well as prosperity, several issues started to come to light. Since the canal cut in and out of the Blackstone River instead of using its own channel the entire time, any issues with the river became issues with the canal, the most common of these being the drought and freezing of sections of the river. With harsh New England weather causing the canal to be inoperable for months at a time, profits were greatly reduced. More problems arose as the number of mills along the river increased. By using parts of the Blackstone River itself, the canal operators would inadvertently cut off power to the mills when filling the locks. The reduction or sometimes elimination of power angered many of the mill owners. who in response would dam the canal with large boulders. Ultimately, the mill owners sued the Blackstone Canal Company in 1833 over the use of the Blackstone River. The mill owners won, giving another blow to the canal's future. However, these issues were not the final cause of the canal's demise. Due to the number of technical problems with the canal, a blossoming and more consistent technology was needed to facilitate the transportation: the railroad. A line from Worcester to Boston was completed in 1834. This had numerous advantages over the canal. It was faster, easier to maintain, and required less manpower. The railroad could also be operational in New England weather for a full 12 months of the year, unlike the canal, while still remaining lower in cost. Although the canal would remain operational for another 14 years, the completion of the rail line would signal the beginning of the end. A rail line to Providence running directly parallel to the canal gave the final blow. Just a year after the rail line's completion in 1847, the Blackstone Canal Company collected its last toll. Despite the numerous setbacks of the canal, it played a critical role in the eventual development of Worcester. The canal made Worcester a hub for transportation, and this only grew stronger with the introduction of railways. Industry in Worcester would continue to grow. If the canal was the spark that moved Worcester toward manufacturing, the railroad was the fuel that greatly grew Worcester's sphere of influence. The developing town started to attract many new faces. The canal and rail lines brought a flood of new immigrants to Worcester. Along with the Irish, many French-Canadian and Swedish immigrants started to arrive to the flourishing city. Years later, scores of Lithuanian, Polish, and Italian newcomers would come as well. Each of these groups would form their own community, working together to help provide support within their respective neighborhoods. Before this immense growth, Worcester was only comparable in size to its neighboring towns. The increased business opportunities and immigration caused a population boom, quickly having a profound effect on the shire town of Worcester. Shortly after the opening of the canal in 1830, there were just over 4,000 residents in Worcester. After 20 years, the canal and railroads were responsible for drastic growth, leading to a population of over 17,000 as early as 1850. This immense development caused a realization for change, and on February 29, 1848, Worcester was officially chartered as a city. The same population boom that caused Worcester to become a city also caused a tremendous amount of new businesses to be formed, some of which would become very notable. The Washburn and Moen shops were among the most notable. Started in 1831, the Washburn and Moen shops were founded by Ichabod Washburn and became a powerhouse by the mid-1800s. By the late 1870s, Washburn and Moen was not only the largest producer of wire products in the United States, but the world. In modern times, wire may seem unremarkable, but at this time period, wire was crucial for any development. Wire was used for laying telegraphs, trains and train cars, and even home goods such as corsets. Washburn and Moen was also well known for its innovation in strengthening wire, as well as creating and producing barbed wire more effectively, making wire Worcester's largest industry. The site of the Washburn and Moen factory is also well known for being near the site of Isaiah Thomas's original paper mill. Along with wire, envelopes and shoes were the other main industries in Worcester. The development of an envelope folding machine by Dr. Russell Hawes allowed for Worcester to become a leader in producing envelopes. The machine eliminated the folding of envelopes by hand, greatly speeding up production times. The Hill Envelope Company inherited the folding machine and produced envelopes at an extraordinary rate for years. In terms of shoes, there were two notable manufacturers in the city at the time: the Haywood Boot and Shoe Company and J.H. and G.M. Walker Company. The Walker brothers used pegged shoe designs that their grandfather invented, which made it easier to attach the top of shoes to the soles, while Walker boots were more popular and known in the West. Another well-known businessman was George Crompton, who was responsible for the building of the Crompton Loom Works, as well as other notable companies. Crompton had refined his father's patent on a process to improve loom machine efficiency, and quickly prospered, expanding his holdings at mills located throughout the city. He achieved worldwide recognition with his loom improvements as early as 1867, winning a silver medal at the Paris exhibition. Many major companies were known for their industrial power. Yet another notable company was the Royal Worcester Corset Company. More notable than the corsets, however, was how they were being produced. Female workers headed the production lines, and they were paid and treated unusually well for the day. The company also had a nurse in the building, which was extremely rare at the time. Worker medical care was almost non-existent in most factories. An injury in the workplace often led to the loss of a job, with laid-off workers being left to deal with injuries on their own. This was not the case at the Royal Worcester Corset Company, and shortly after the turn of the 20th century, the company would be the largest employer of women in the country, setting a standard for conditions in the workplace as well as equal rights. Worcester's industrial creativity was not limited to the large companies that controlled the majority of production in the city. The city also proved to be a place where entrepreneurs were encouraged to start something greater than themselves. Two notable capital investors of Worcester were William T. Merrifield and Stephen Salisbury II. They owned refurbished factory buildings which were rented out to entrepreneurs looking to create small startup companies. The Court Mills and Merrifield building provided Worcester's small businesses with early support. Unfortunately, the Merrifield building burned down in 1854. This innovative and entrepreneurial spirit would help contribute to Worcester's technological innovation. Small businesses could flourish, helping to nurture new ideas in large numbers. From this great amount of industry and innovation, Worcester produced several notable inventions: the monkey wrench and the first practical typewriter. Worcester was even the birthplace of some inventions lost in translation, being believed to have invented the rickshaw, which is typically associated with Eastern Asia, as well as the first bicycle produced in the United States. The most groundbreaking item to come out of Worcester was the monkey wrench, being especially innovative and useful when working on machines. Invented by the Coase brothers and produced by their wrench company, the convenient one-handed monkey wrench replaced more cumbersome two-handed wrenches, commonly used at the time. Instead of searching for a specific tool, a factory repairman could simply carry this new wrench. The monkey wrench could be adjusted to the size of the bolt or part when the repairman arrived. The use of the monkey wrench led to greater productivity, stemming from quicker and more frequent repairs. The vibrant industrial and social history of America is told here throughout the landscape of the Blackstone Valley. In December 2014, Congress passed legislation creating a new national park, the Blackstone River Valley National Historical Park.
How can this canal, this new technology, make money for me as a merchant? It's that innovative thinking, this new way of looking at new technology that allows us to move ahead, whether we're back in 1828 or even today in 2015. So it's something to think about. How can the canal make money for me, Nathan heard say. And we can say the same thing today. How can the canal make Worcester a better city?
The face of Worcester has changed continuously over the course of history. The most recent of these changes resulting in an innovative college town excelling in medical research. The Blackstone Canal sparked prosperity and culture once before. Who is to say a partial recreation would not cause the same to happen again today?